my internship at the River in Aurora, where Danielle works actually. And that was the first day I was there. They're like, "Oh, that's the production guy. He does all this stuff with Cool Edit," and that was just furthered my love for what I wanted to do, hanging out with that guy. So I started interning there, and eventually they hired me on part-time, which turned into doing whatever I could to keep my production skills up. They knew I wanted to do that, so when they hired me, I was just doing like remote stuff, which is not what I wanted to do, but I wanted to just work in radio, period. So I was setting up remotes and doing promotion stuff, and in return they would give me some weekend production hours, and that's what they knew I wanted to do. So it was really nice of them to do that for me. I did that for about 6 months, worked part-time, and then the production guy got fired. Since I was there and I kind of knew what to do, they were like, "Well, just take care of it until we find somebody else." And probably because I worked cheap, they hired me to be the production director at the River. I worked there for 5 years, and then I worked for the same company. I went to Joliet, where they have 4 stations in the building in Joliet. So I was the production director for all 4 of those stations for 5 years. And then finally in January, I head out to US 99, and I've been there for the last 6 months, and it's great, and it's a dream come true, and it's something I wanted to do for 10 years, and I'm finally working downtown. I'm working for one of the top 4 stations in Chicago. It's wonderful. It's everything I dreamed it would be. It's a lot of hard work. It was a lot of patience. It was a lot of everything that you've probably heard already. I'm probably not telling you anything new, but it's hopefully a good example of if you just wait and if you work hard and if you hustle, that's what everything's about. And there's hard work always gets noticed. I know in 10 years, I can remember every hardworking intern, hardworking part-timer, and they've always gotten further, gotten far because they were hard workers and they did what you asked them to do, and they were asked if they could do extra, and they did something they didn't want to do, but they just wanted to work in radio. It's all about passion. It's all about hustle. It's about just doing a good job and being patient. That's a huge thing. I was an instructor here too for 6 years on and off, and a lot of times people will come in and expect right when they left they were going to get their dream job, and it might happen. You might be lucky. You might leave and get the job that you came here that you had in mind, but more often than not, you're going to leave and you're not going to have the job that you have in mind. I certainly didn't. My aspiration when I came here wasn't to work in the suburbs of Chicago, but I did it for 11 years because I eventually wanted to work downtown, and it was totally worth it. And I met a lot of people. I had a good time. I sharpened my skills. I learned a lot of things. I was constantly learning, and it all eventually paid off. And it took quite a long time, but it was well worth it. Has everybody done like a shift on the edge, or have it consistent? Do you do a podcast? If you want to be on the air? When I was an instructor here, I used to always ask people who wanted to be on the air, if you've never done a shift or if you've never done a podcast, you have to do it. Like, in addition to coming to school, you have to try as hard as you can. I know busy work schedules and trying to get all your intern hours, and there's a lot that's required from the school. But the biggest thing that you're going to get out of doing a shift on the edge or doing a podcast is the experience, and you can build up all that stuff for your resume or for your demo at the end. It's a lot easier, and I see a lot of people at the end, they didn't have enough stuff because if you do a shift, if you do a sports show, if you do something on the edge, you do a podcast, save everything. That way you can use some of that stuff at the end. You're not starting totally from scratch on a demo. You've got good stuff saved if you do it on a consistent basis, so that way you can use it at the end for all your demo material. You're not starting from scratch. That's one reason. And the other reason, if you are going to get a job and you have on your resume that you did a shift for a year, it doesn't matter what radio station it is or what you did, it looks great on a resume rather than you went to a broadcasting school, you want to be on the air, and you never did a shift. Like, it just looks kind of strange. So make sure that you're getting on the air if that's what you want to do. Another piece of advice is get to know. If you want to be on the radio, get to be a complete radio nerd while you're here, and spend a lot of free time, even if it's something you're not listening to, because you never know what your first job's going to be when you leave and what kind of format you're going to go to, and what you need to know about. Like, I was not a country music fan before I got this job in January at all. So when I was interviewing, when I found out the position was open, I started listening, and it's a completely different station. It's a unique station because It's a country music station in Chicago, so it's not like it's not your typical audience. The demographic is not typical of a country music station because they're not talking to people who live in the country. They're talking to people who live in an urban setting. So it's completely different than what my first thoughts were when I started listening to it. So if I went in there blind, like 2.5 weeks after I got there, they asked me to do an on-air shift. And if I had not listened to the station before and knew what they were about, and they threw me on the air, and I thought I had to act like a hillbilly, I would have completely been out of place when I went on the air. That's not what they're going after. Like even when they put together sweepers for the station, they stay away from like the artist. If they use an artist in it, they stay away from the artists who sound really Southern because they don't want it to sound like that because you're broadcasting to people in a city. So they keep away from really twangy artists. Like they just don't want that kind of. It doesn't speak to the people that they're broadcasting to. So every station is unique. You have like country format, a classic rock format. All your formats are different. Or you have the big umbrella, but every station also is different. So make sure you realize that you know there's the mix. There's whatever the light FM is basically the same format, but they're completely different in what they're executing on the air. So you have to be kind of knowledgeable that way when you're going to intern, when you're going to get a job, of what to expect if they ask you questions of, if you listen or if you want to work here, and they might ask you specific questions about the station that you're applying for. So if the more you know and the more knowledgeable you are about what you're applying for, the better. So just listen to as many, challenge yourself to listen to something different. There's so many stations around that you've got the routine. I've got a routine of what I listen to, and when I was teaching here, I was trying to listen to everything because your radio listening is not the same as mine, I'm sure, and yours is not the same as his or is the same as mine. So if anybody had a question for me about B96, which I don't listen to, but I would be able to answer it because I've listened to it and I know that other people listen to it. So if you had a question for me, like why do they do X, Y, Z, I can tell you because I've been able to listen to it. If you go into a job interview, even not in Chicago, if you go to, the nice thing about a lot of these stations, if you're applying for something out of state, they're all streaming. So you can listen in your free time online. There's a lot of like old students that I have that have jobs, and it's really nice for these people that stream because they tell me when they're on, and I can listen to them on online, which is really cool. So a lot of people that I've been able to hear. There's a guy in Wyoming that just graduated. I've been able to hear him online, and a couple other people in like Missouri and a couple other markets I've been able to listen to because thank God for streaming. So am I rambling or am I making any sense? All right, good. We're really great here about hooking. If you're really passionate about like, is there somewhere you really want to intern at? Is there like are you specifically? They're really good about hooking you up with interviews, and I think the school has a pretty decent reputation of having. There's ICB interns everywhere, so I don't think that you're going to have a hard time getting an interview, and I think, and you're going to go through a whole process of like how to interview and important things to say when you're interviewing, but they give you all the contact information, they give you everything, but just be yourself when you go in there. They'll go through, you get like mock interviews that you get to do. So you'll be really prepared when you go in. And if there's something you really, really want, I don't know who the internship coordinator is now, but they should be really good about if you really want to work as a score, to let somebody know like this is really where I want to be, and I think they'll try to work with you about trying as hard as they can to place you where they want. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, they give you like a ton of contact information. Use your instructors, Danielle knows a ton of people who don't work at the river, just from being
interviewed interns and stuff?
Oh yeah.
So then what do you personally look for?
People who can engage in a conversation, which is it's funny, but there's a lot of people who, and I understand people are nervous, but if you just like if you're in I know it's hard and you're nervous and you don't, but if you look really uninterested, if you look like you don't want to be there, if I can tell that this is not where you want to be, it's going to be over before you even get started. So just go in and be friendly. be a little bit prepared about where, like I was saying before, even if it's something you don't want to do or it's someplace you don't want to go, listen to the station for 3 days beforehand so you have some kind of knowledge when they go in of the radio station, of what they're doing. You can bring up something. If you look interested, always if they say, do you have any questions for me at the end, think of, even if it's the dumbest ass thing you can think of something that you can ask them, because that always impressed me. Where if I go, do you have any questions for me, and somebody asked me something, I loved it because it showed they wanted to be there, they were interested, they were listening to the station, they were curious about what they're going to do. But so just seem excited, seem like you want to be there, be professional, and it's going to probably work out for you.